Hi, everybody. Mrs. Somick, I'm here to introduce to you our next reading standard that we're going to be focusing on over the next few weeks. We spent a lot of time on learning how to identify supporting details from a selection and using those details to create a main idea statement. Okay, so now we're going to continue working with those details as well and pulling out the details we need to help us create a summary of the selection that we have read. So summarizing. How do we create a summary? How do we summarize the text? Well, you can probably see behind me here, I've got a bubble map that's going to describe what good summaries should have in them, and we're going to get there. But I thought we'd do something a little fun today, okay? So I'm going to take fairy tales, for instance, and we're going to practice summarizing some fairy tales together, okay? Now, I struggled with summarizing when I was a young girl, and someone taught me a little trick to help me pull out only the details that I need to create a good summary. I use my 5 fingers, okay? And we'll look at the reading packet here in just a minute. But if I use my 5 fingers, I can think of 5 key words that are going to help me create a summary. Hold up your 5 fingers. Here we go. The first word is somebody. I need you to think about the somebody in the story. In other words, who's the main character, right? Next, I want you to think of the word wanted. Well, in all great, especially fictional and fairy tales stories, these characters want to do something. Okay, what does the character want? So somebody wanted, but they're going to face a problem. What is that problem? Okay. Somebody wanted, but, so how are they going to try to go about solving this problem? Okay, what are their steps? And then is the final word, then. How does the story end? So you ready to review one more time? Somebody wanted, but, so then. If you use those 5 key words, it's going to help you develop your own good, solid summary. Okay, so I want us to take a look here at the little packet page that I put for you in your reading packets. It's on page 9. So I'm going to pause for just a second, let you get that packet in front of you, and we're going to talk about it. Here we go. All right, friends, I hope you have opened up to page 9 in your packet. And just as a reminder, these are those 5 key words that we use here to help us remember what we need for a good, solid summary, especially with our fictional stories here. So we're going to use these 5 keywords to help brainstorm a good solid summary together before I actually read aloud another fairy tale to you. So again, what are my words? Somebody. Who's the main character? Wanted. What did the character want? But what's the problem? So how did this character try to solve the problem? And then what was the resolution to the story? Well, just as a quick little practice, let's think about the story of Cinderella. Okay, if you remember Cinderella, she is obviously our main character. So Cinderella would be our somebody. What does Cinderella want more than anything? What does she want? She wanted to go to the ball. But what was Cinderella's problem? Oh, her evil stepmother would not let her go to the ball. So what happened that's going to help Cinderella solve this problem? Remember her fairy godmother? She comes and grants her her wish so she can go to the ball. Then after going to the ball, she meets the prince, and eventually they live happily ever after. So if I use those key words, I can create a really quick summary of the story of Cinderella. Cinderella wanted to go to the ball, but her evil stepmother would not let her go. So her fairy godmother granted her wish, and then Cinderella was able to go to the ball, meet the prince, and live happily ever after. Okay. I'm going to pause here because I'm actually going to do a read aloud of a different fairy tale that you're going to use for your Google assignment today. All right, hope you're ready. All right, friends, this is the story that we're going to actually use today to create a 5-finger summary that you will complete in your Google Classroom assignment for reading for me today. The story that we're going to read today is Hansel Gretel, and this is retold and illustrated by James Marshall. This is one of my favorite versions of this story. So let's get started. Once upon a time, in a cottage near a vast forest, there lived a poor woodcutter, his wife, and his 2 children. The boy was called Hansel, and the girl Gretel. At the best of times, the family had precious little to live on, but now there was a great famine in the land, and food was scarcer than ever. The woodcutter's wife was worried there wouldn't be enough for her. "Those wretched children of yours are gobbling everything up," she said to her husband. "Do you want your pretty little wife to waste away? Something will have to be done." "Yes, my dearest," said the poor woodcutter, who was afraid of his wife's ferocious temper. "She doesn't like us," said Gretel. "Yes, she does," said Hansel, but he didn't mean it. Here they are. One night, when the woodcutter was tossing and turning and worrying about how to feed his family, his wife revealed a plan. "Listen to this," she whispered in her husband's ear. "We will take the children into the woods, give them a bit of bread, and leave them there." "Never," cried the woodcutter, but his wife badgered and badgered. "My poor children," cried the woodcutter. "I know it's best, you dolt," said his wife. "Oh, dear," whispered Gretel. "Don't worry," said Hansel. "I'll take care of us." And slipping out in the moonlit night, he gathered up as many white pebbles as he could find. "What are you doing?" said Gretel. "You'll see," said Hansel. "Up, you lazy bones," cried the woodcutter's wife early the next morning. "It's time to go to the forest to fetch wood." And she gave Hansel and Gretel a crust of bread. "Save it for lunch. It's all you'll get." The family set off, and in a short while Hansel stopped and turned around. Soon he did it again. "Why are you lagging behind, Hansel?" asked his father. "I'm looking back at my white kitten on the roof," said Hansel. "You donkey," snapped the woodcutter's wife. "That's not your kitten. That's the morning sun on the chimney." And they entered the vast forest. She does not seem like a very nice mother to me. In the middle of the forest, Hansel and Gretel were told to build a fire of brushwood and to wait. "We'll soon return," said the woodcutter's wife, and the children were left alone. They heard the sound of an axe chopping nearby, and they thought their father must be nearby, but it really was a bough he had tied to a dead tree, being blown about in the wind. At midday they ate their bread and waited patiently. The afternoon slowly passed, but no one came. Finally the children closed their eyes and went to sleep. When they woke, it was pitch black. "Are you frightened?" said Gretel. "Of course not," said Hansel. When the moon had risen, Hansel took Gretel by the hand and showed her how they could follow the trail of white pebbles. "What a clever brother I had," said Hansel. It took them the rest of the night to get out of the forest. When the children arrived home at daybreak, the woodcutter's wife was shocked and infuriated, although she quickly pretended to be glad to see them. "We thought you were never coming back," she said. Hansel and Gretel believed the worst to be over, but soon there came another famine, and the woodcutter's wife began to fret. "There's hardly enough for the two of us to eat," she said to her husband. "We'll simply have to take the children back to the woods." "Not again," whispered Gretel. "Don't worry," said Hansel. But when he went to gather up more pebbles, he found the door bolted. She had seen to that. The next morning the children were given a bit of bread, and the family set off. Every few paces Hansel turned about to strew a handful of breadcrumbs behind him. "Why are you tarrying, Hansel?" said his father. "I'm looking back at my white pigeon on the roof," said Hansel. "Simpleton," cried the woodcutter's wife. "That isn't your pigeon. That's the morning sun on the chimney." When they came to the most forbidding part of the forest, the woodcutter's wife said, "You will wait here while your father and I gather wood. We will be back soon." Hansel and Gretel did not believe her. At midday, Gretel shared her bread with Hansel, and soon they did before they fell asleep. And when they awoke, it was pitch black. "Oh," said Gretel. "When the moon rises," said Hansel, "we will follow the trail of breadcrumbs out of the woods." But when the moon rose, they found no breadcrumbs. The birds in the forest had eaten them all up. "We'll never get out," cried Gretel. They wandered on deeper and deeper into the forest, eating whatever berries they could find. When they had been away from home for 3 days, a snow-white bird appeared. "Let's follow it," said Hansel. The snow-white bird led them to a clearing where there was a small house made of cookies and candy, spun sugar and cake. It was like no house they'd ever seen. Being terribly hungry, the children set about having a regular feast. Hansel broke off a piece of roof cake, and Gretel tried a bit of window sugar. It was as good as it looked, and suddenly they hear a shrill voice from inside. "Nibble, nibble, little mousie. Who's that nibbling on my housie?" Uh-oh. The door flew open. "What's this?" said a lady who Gretel was sure was a witch. "Two tasty, pretty children have come to stay. Now don't be alarmed, my angels. I'm really very sweet." and she took Hansel and Gretel by the hand and led them inside, where a sumptuous dinner of sugared pancakes with apples and nuts had been prepared. Hansel and Gretel ate until they were perfectly stuffed. "Time for sleep now," said the lady, and she tucked them in snug warm beds and tiptoed away. "She's nice," said Hansel. Said Gretel. I don't think Gretel's totally convinced. The next morning, the lady, who was indeed a witch, snatched Hansel from his bed, carried him outside, and tossed him right into a cage. "Lovely," said the witch, "lovely. This is where I shall fatten you up, and when you're all plump and juicy, I shall have a regular feast." "You let my brother out," cried Gretel, but the witch, who was delighted with her handiwork, only cackled and did a little dance. Poor Gretel, who had to do the witch's bidding, was put to work cooking enormous meals for Hansel. For her own dinner, Gretel was given only crab shells. Every morning the witch would go to Hansel's cage to see how much fatter he'd grown. "Hansel, stick out your finger," she said, and Hansel would stick out an old chicken bone. Witches, as everyone knows, have beady red eyes and dreadfully bad eyesight. "I simply don't understand it," said the witch. "You're as thin as a bone. I can't eat you." Now Hansel's little trick worked for some time. Every morning the hungry witch was annoyed to find him still so scrawny. "Phooey," said the witch, "not yet." But finally she had run completely out of patience. "I'll just have to eat you as you are," she said. And she had a consoling thought. "Perhaps you should eat the little one too." "Gretel, dear," she said, "would you please peek into the oven to see if it's sufficiently hot?" But Gretel saw what she had in mind. "I don't know how," she said stupidly. "Goose," cried the witch, "I'll show you." And she crawled partially into the oven. Really, there was only one thing for Gretel to do, and she gave the witch a tremendous shove. The horrid witch roasted into a regular crisp. "We're free!" cried Gretel. "The witch is dead." Hansel flew out of the cage like a bird. "What a clever little sister I have," he cried. And together they explored the witch's house, where they found boxes and boxes of precious gems and gold coins. "Better than pebbles," said Hansel, "but now it is time to leave the witch's wood." And when they wandered out for some time, they came to a wide lake. A kindly duck offered to ferry them across, and as they neared the opposite shore, Gretel was sure they could see their father's house in the distance. When the children reached home, their father welcomed them with open arms, but he loved them dearly and had been miserable without them. He told them his wife had died. Whether Hansel and Gretel were sorry is difficult to say, but with their father, they lived happily ever after. All right, friends, I'm going to go ahead and pull up your Google document, and I'm going to explain what you're going to do for today now that we have finished reading Hansel and Gretel. All right, so when you go into your Google document, you're actually going to see the breakdown of this worksheet right here. Now, whether you write in your answers and then type them into the Google Forms, that's totally up to you. But please make sure you put it in the Google Form so we can see what you guys come up with for your summary of Hansel and Gretel. Now, let's think back on those 5 key details. Remember, somebody. Who were the main characters? Who were they? Hansel and Gretel, of course. What did Hansel and Gretel want? What were they wanting? Well, their mother and their father kept putting them in the woods, right? And they were just wanting to return home. That's what they were wanting to do. But what was the problem? Remember the witch? Okay, they were trapped at the witch's house, weren't they? Okay, so how did they get away from the witch? What did they do? Think back on that. And then the last part is I want you to kind of think on how did the story end? So once they were able to come up with a plan to get away from the witch, then how did the story end? All right, use those 5 key words to help you develop a good, solid summary of Hansel and Gretel. Can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Until next time.